Hi everybody, in this video I will be giving you 5 easy tips to improve your chess game immediately. This video is applicable for anyone up to an intermediate skill level. If you're wondering whether you should be watching this video, you probably should watch it. Even if you don't know how to move the pieces or you're interested in starting chess, I'd recommend watch this video and from there go learn how to move the pieces. If you can start implementing these tips now, you will be guaranteed immediate success. These tips are so easy to learn, you don't need to learn any moves, they are simple concepts that every good player should know. So let's dive into the video. I hope you enjoy. So point number 1 is to always play for the center. This is extremely important. As you can see from the position on board, both players are playing for the center. The pawns are moving forwards in the middle. White can play knight e5. Black's also attacking the e4 square. The reason why it is a good idea to play for the center is because when you're in the middle, your pieces can move to both sides of the board, where if you play on the side, it is possible for your pieces to get trapped as they can't really move around much and your king can get overwhelmed without support. So yeah, this is extremely important. Don't move your pieces to the side of the board unless you absolutely have to. Keep it in the middle and keep it strong. An example of a bad move, if we go a few moves back, we can see black played knight d7, which is a pretty strong move. This puts pressure on e5, threatening the c5 pawn push in the future. An example of a bad move would be knight a6, playing on the side of the board. After white plays c3, you can't really do much as black. The knight can't move to b4 or c5, and it kind of has to come back to c7 or b8 and move back to the middle, and thus we've wasted some moves. This is going to cause problems later on as well. For example, white can even take the knight with the bishop, giving black a bad pawn structure. The a pawns are doubled and isolated, and the c6 pawn is a backward pawn as well. So yeah, always try play for the center. So let's move on to point 2. Keep a strong pawn structure. This is extremely important and crucial to having a good game. As you can see on board, white has a pawn chain starting on f2, protecting e3 and d4. This is also in the middle of the board. Black has a pawn chain as well from f7 to e6 to d5 and also protected by c6. But the problem here is the doubled and isolated pawns on the a file. They cannot protect each other, so have to be protected by pieces. You always want your pawns to rather protect your pieces rather than larger pieces protecting weak pawns. So at some point these two pawns are going to be taken by white, as white is taking up the center nicely and has control of the space. This is not good for black. The c6 pawn is also weak because of the doubled a pawns. The c6 pawn is called a backward pawn as it does not have another pawn defending it. The best move here would probably be for black to try and push the pawn to c5 and exchange it to make sure it isn't backward anymore. Otherwise later in the game this pawn is going to be lost. So always try to keep strong pawn chains and avoid doubled, isolated and backward pawns where you can. This is going to cause problems later on as well. For example, white can even take the knight with the bishop, giving black a bad pawn structure. The a pawns are doubled and isolated and the c6 pawn is a backward pawn as well. So yeah, always try play for the center. So linking to this, at the start of the game, please don't start your games by moving a3, h3, a6 or h6. It's really bad. Always play for the center and leave your side pawns alone unless really necessary. Point 3 is to always protect the king. The objective in chess is to checkmate the king, so this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm quickly going to explain to you the easiest ways to do this. If you didn't know about the castle move, let me explain that to you quickly. If you haven't moved your king or your rook in the game yet, you can do a move called castling, which looks like this. You must move your king 2 squares and cross the rook over in one move. Pretty cool, right? Make sure to move the king first. If you move the rook first, this will be disallowed. You can't castle through check, so if this bishop, for example, is sitting on b5, you wouldn't be able to castle as your king would move through check. If you are in check, you also can't castle, obviously. You can also castle on the queen side. It is the same move by moving the king 2 squares and then crossing the rook over. I would recommend castling on the king side to start off with. The queen side is a bit more aggressive and not as safe. This will help you win the game. Some other important points once you have castled. Try not to move your pawns in front of the king, so g3, h3, h4, etc. are not good moves unless absolutely necessary. This is going to open your king up and leave it more exposed. There are some situations where you won't want to castle. This is a bit rare and more advanced, so I won't go into too much detail. But if your position is already open on the G and H files, or the A and B files, and you cannot castle either way, it may be better to leave your king protected in the center, behind the D and E pawns, if you still have a solid pawn structure there. So always look out for the best way to protect your king, but usually kingside castling is the best, and you are then ready to play and win the game. Point number 4 is develop all your minor pieces before you start overextending your pawns on your opponent's side of the board and before making multiple wasted moves with your queen. If you don't do this, you will lose out on what we call a tempo. If your opponent develops all their pieces and you make multiple queen moves and get chased around, your pieces will end up sitting on the back rank and your rooks will be stuck. You will end up getting checkmated because you won't have any active pieces to defend your position. So let's have a look at an example. White is going to develop the pieces nicely and black is going to play poorly. You should not be doing this. As you can see, we have created a nice position for white as we have taken control of the center with these two pieces and we have two strong pawn chains. We have castled and all of our minor pieces are developed and protected. Now we can start playing the game to win. We have moves like queen h5, we can play f3 to threaten e4, we can break open black's pawns because they are pushed too far. You might look at black's position and think that they have a few pawn chains, but these pawns are not good. Moves like a4 will break this open. The king is not safe and this is just a bad position for black. This is a good example of why to develop your knight and bishop first and not to overextend your pawns. Point number 5 is to always take advantage of open files. So the position on board shows white taking control of the A file, both rooks are doubled up and black is stuck defending this pawn on the b file. Black's pieces are stuck behind the pawn with nowhere to move. This is going to cause problems and black is eventually going to lose this pawn. Black has very little space and there are always threats of white's rooks moving to a8, maybe threatening some sort of checkmate. By taking control of the space, white can then maneuver the pieces around and win the pawn. An example would be knight b1, knight c3 to attack the pawn. Black is really stuck with limited options and it's going to be difficult to defend this. In the end, black will probably make a mistake and lose the pawn. Remember to always take advantage of open files when you can. The rooks could also play along the c file. c5 is defended by black, so white couldn't use that square, but rook c8 would be a check compared to the rook on a8. There will always be different choices and opportunities, but if you take control of these open files, you will always be in a better position and hopefully win the game. So very quickly to summarize, always play for the center, keep a strong pawn structure, protect the king, develop your minor pieces early, and take control of open files. Please try use these tips in game. It's really not a lot to remember. I would recommend even maybe writing them down, printing the slide out, keep it next to you on the table, and whenever you play online, give it a go. Soon it'll become second nature to you and you'll be twice the chess player that you used to be. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please leave a like, give a comment down below, let me know if this helped you, and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, bye for now.